Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have Brown Griggs with me. He was our speaker here in Maui at our most recent IANS meeting, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And I know he's spoken at several of their conferences, as well as he has an amazing TED Talk. And he's also had 2 near-death experiences. So welcome, Louis.
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to be with you.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on my podcast after meeting you last week and having such an amazing time. We had lunch before our meeting, and I just could feel the light and the essence of your soul beaming through you. And I think that once somebody's had a near-death experience, it just completely shifts their energy, right?
Some of us need to get hit that hard to bring back all the light. You're right.
That's right. That's right. And, but I love being around other people that have had these out of body experiences, because again, the resonance that I feel when I'm with somebody like that is just so palpable. And I loved your talk at our group. It was so enlightening. And so I'm thrilled, like I said, to have you here to share with my listeners some of your stories. So, you know, is there anything you want to say before we launch into one of your or both of your near-death experiences?
Oh, I just love this life-changing work and sharing it with others and learning as much from others. Once we've all had these experiences, the stories are amazing because they're less about the details of the story. They're more about the learnings and the gifts and the light and the energy we bring back to share. And it's such a treat to finally be able to come from such a deep inner place instead of from the left frontal lobe, you know?
Absolutely. Right. Because you no longer have that, right? Or at least a part of it.
Let's say the balance has been improved, you know?
Okay. That's good.
I'll say more about that when I get to the second death, but.
Excellent. Well, first of all, tell our listeners, what was your background before your first near-death experience?
Okay. As my favorite painting of Gauguin says in French in the upper left corner, who are you, where do you come from, and where are you going? So
I love it.
Who am I? Where I come from? I am a straight white male of 14th generation Mayflower descent and an Amherst political science BA and a Stanford Enterprise MBA. And I have started a diversity training company 36 years ago, and that's been my professional career. I'm a father of a girl and a boy and a stepfather of 2 teenage boys. And that's as short as I can be about a long life.
Well, I love it. I love it. That's a great little, just a little snapshot of who you are. And so tell us about that near-death experience, that first one that, I'd say woke you up to life, really, right?
Sure. Yeah. In fact, after I got out of Amherst College, I went to work in politics in DC because I wanted to have my life in politics. I left because of ethics. I went up to Boston and worked in a startup educational company and then worked for public television in Boston and drove across country to work for public television in San Francisco. And having worked in nonprofit and government and a startup at that age, at about 28, something like that, I felt like, what am I going to do when I grow up? And the timing must have been right for me to feel uncertain, because no sooner had I moved here than I totaled my automobile on March 11, 77. That's now 41 years ago, here in Berkeley. And all of us who've had near-death experiences share some of the aspects in common, and others are different. So I've learned to say quickly and easily that I am not one who stayed and watched the accident or the surgery. Nor am I one who was given a choice to stay forever in the light or to come back. And nor, as some others have told me, if given a choice, that I therefore wasn't given a choice to return in this body or into a new infant's body. Those are all the various forms we've all heard, right? I was flown high speed through the so-called tunnel without any stop at all. No meeting deceased relatives or anything either. And I also am one who did have what we call a conversation with God because what other words can describe this voice that speaks with us? Not all have had that. And so the short version, but still never, the words have never changed because it's exactly what I remember perfectly. And that is, I was told immediately, so as to avoid any confusion or wondering, Lewis, you are called here to have this conversation and to be sent back because you're not doing your work. In response to which, I did something like, even though I wasn't in body, it was as if I raised my arms, and said, take me, I'm yours. I'll do your work, as if I'm being called to be a Christian missionary. Has to do with being raised, I forgot to say, an Episcopalian Christian. And so I was told immediately with this wonderful voice, and we all hear whatever voice we need to hear, of course, in whatever language or gender. And the voice I heard sounded like this one, a deep male voice. And I was told, no, that's not my work you need to be doing, Lewis. It's your work. And so I asked, well, what is my work? Because I didn't really know. I felt somewhat satisfied, and yet, as I've already shared, a little uncertain what I was really going to do when I grow up. And I was asked, well, what is it that keeps you from being all you're capable of being? And I was feeling, in the human level of emotion, a little frustrated because I was assuming, since I was now in the source of all truth and with the voice that knows all, that I would be told what my work is. And that wasn't the case. I had to dig deeply to try to answer this question of what is it that keeps me from being all I'm capable of being. So the shortest version that kind of describes the essence of a whole life is that, with the background I've already shared with you and all the privilege and education, private education and ethics and values and etc., I was told by loving parents, we are all one under God. And yet, noblesse oblige, you who've been given everything must give back, and you have gifts others don't have. So depending on the energy with which that's said, it certainly is intended to be purely a spiritual truth about our purpose. And yet, as many of the listeners can understand, if they've heard similar things, it can also have with it a class cultural righteousness about you're better than others. And that's not a melanin issue. That happens with leaders all over this earth, leaders in Africa or the Middle East or Asia or North America. Something happens with leaders who are so proud of how well they've done that even the best of them with best intention want to give back, but with it comes either charity or righteousness or pride, all of which are words for a reason. So I don't want to judge or shame any of them. And yet the reason I share them now is that I grew up with a feeling like, I know we're all one under God, but I'm better. And I didn't have arrogance with it. I actually felt uncomfortable about it, because when I looked in the eyes of any other human spirit, I kind of knew that at the core soul level, we're all one, but in these unique, diverse human bodies, we're not the same. And so it was in that light and in that conversation with God, as we call it, that I realized, it must be that what keeps me from being all I'm capable of being is that I know we're all one under God. And here I am in the source. The words I have to describe it, because words aren't enough, is all together. I was in the source of all energy, all light, all love, all consciousness, all knowledge, all at once. And at the source, having been aware of 2 prior lives of mine, I was aware that this is the source of where what we call our soul comes from before we land into these bodies. Well, we are all one at the source, and we land in the only DNA in the history of life on Earth. Every single one of us. We aren't exactly like the same gender, age, race, class, education, orientation, or anything. We have things in common with some of those. Like even you and I have some things in common and some different. We're speaking the same language, we're different gender, we're North Americans, etc. So we're all one and uniquely different. And that was the deepest learning I've ever had about humanity. And instead of that being a conflict, I experienced it as a huge opening and a huge acceptance and relaxation, that instead of being a conflict between being one and being uniquely different, it made it easier for me to get, we are simultaneously all one in so many ways and uniquely different in ways that instead of being a threat or a challenge to one another, are an opportunity to be a gift to one another. Because all we can be is who we are in these bodies, in this soul. The rest are taken, right? So
Right.
only you're free to be you and I'm free to be me, and we can value those differences as gifts to one another. Wow, that's life-changing.
That is.
So,
I had a question about that real quick before we go on. So do you think our differences, is that for our soul learning? I mean, I'm just curious, because I totally get the concept of being all one, right? But then there are people that are born with quote unquote disabilities or challenges. And so do you think that is a soul learning? I don't know. I'm just curious. I don't have the answer for sure, but I'm just curious what your
well,
thoughts
as any
are.
of us knows, when we've come back from the light, none of us has any scientific answer that is the truth.
No, exactly.
So all we have is our experience and whatever we learned, and then the rest is our assumptions or presumptions based on that. So I can tell you the way to get into that is to say one more sentence and then get into that. And that
Yeah.
is, after my answer was that it must be that I'm trained, we're all one, but I don't know how because of my ethnocentric privileged background. I don't know how to bridge the gap between me and any other human who isn't a straight, white, Anglo, yuppie, wasp speaking English.
Right.
And so when I said that, the conversation resulted in the voice of God saying what Mozart said in Amadeus. If you remember the best scene in Amadeus where he hit this perfect note and went, there it is. Well, I'm serious. The voice of God said, well, there it is, Louis. There's your work. And I was immediately sent back down with not another word, as if my work was somehow to learn how to bridge the gap between me and anybody different, because that's the work this straight white boy needed. And lo and behold, the minute I landed in my body, feeling like getting through tight rubber gloves that only surgeons need, and I remember that feeling until this white light left me in a totaled automobile with no physical damage. And I walked out of this totaled machine to the ambulance that had just arrived and said, there's no problem. And I then couldn't talk about what I had just experienced. Most of us can't for 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years. We try and we get feedback like it's okay, or imagine it, etc. Now it's more open. But that was my experience. And the first learning I had before I then go into answering your question is I started to notice that doors opened that I had nothing to do with. Now that may sound strange to some, but given how I was raised that I could open any door I want. And so I really humbly say I actually noticed what a relief it was and what an opportunity it was to notice a door opening that I didn't manage or control, and that I had an opportunity to enter it and discover whatever may or may not be available for me to be a part of. And that for me, that was a form of being before doing. But when you're raised in this culture with private education to maximize the utilization of your left frontal lobe, all you know is what to do. And you think they have the power to do it. So I just love sharing the deepest learning I've ever had was what a relief it is to have doors open I have nothing to do with and go be a part of something in an appropriate way, and then to utilize whatever gifts I've been given, while you and others are using whatever gifts they've been given to co-create whatever our common goals are.
Beautiful.
That was my learning.
That's beautiful.
Now, actually, that is also a good transition to answer your question. So again, I don't have scientific fact. I just know that we do, nor do I know, I can't prove that everything that happens to each of us was intentionally designed to be that way. Maybe yes, maybe no, sometimes yes, sometimes no. However, what I do know is that whatever body we land in with whatever DNA and whatever crisis happens in life are absolute huge learning opportunities that may have all been the plan of this lifetime for this soul, and or maybe some of them are just learning opportunities because there's a vast amount of learning that we each need. So I don't want to sound righteous about that, except my attitude about that is, now I get whatever happens is an opportunity for learning. It may have been chosen, it may have been chosen by me instead of for me, but in any case, it's my soul and this human personality that helped co-create it. And I now take 100% responsibility instead of blaming it, even the crisis, on something caused by someone else, because I'm 100% responsible for choosing every incident in which I find myself and accepting it or not and being part of it or not. And therefore, not only the great things, I deserve some credit for helping to co-create, but the so-called critical things and crises, I get to go, well, here I am. What am I here for? Instead of seeing it only as some awful thing. So therefore, everybody, whether they're in a male, female, straight, gay, old, young, able, disabled, those are life experiences that may be connected with the prior lives of that soul. And maybe they're continuations of it. My experience is of my prior two lives that I am exactly the same soul. And each of those lifetimes I'm aware of were pieces of the same learning, which doesn't mean I'm just repeating and not growing. It's growth beyond where I was in those. And so that's my answer based on my experience.
I love that. I love that so much. And when you talk about doors opening without you doing anything, is that because of your privilege you're saying, or I'm not quite clear?
Yeah, it's because having been raised so that I did have the privilege to open any door I want.
Right.
I literally very humbly say, my God, in a way, what a relief it was not always to be right.
Right.
Or to even imagine, right? What a relief it was to just notice that there's this whole universe. And I have this huge opportunity to just be a part of it and then do whatever's an appropriate part for me to do. And it depends on with whom I'm being and doing. Because now my experience is, in every case, in this case with you, what's our common goal? And what differences do we each bring to make this common goal more possible? Mm-hmm. And more successful. And that's the opportunity with every single person I meet, as I say, from the boardroom to the bedroom and at the grocery store and at work. So that was the source of my then helping to co-create with my global wife the first cultural diversity training in the US. And it was her idea to say, the purpose of this is to have the first training that teaches straight white men who don't get it how to get it. And she said that with love. And so without judgment and no shame and no blame, I'm just doing my own work all the time to try to learn how to build these bridges more successfully across whatever differences I encounter. And I've been teaching that for 36 years in the workplace, not on the street. It's even more complex on the street. But in the workplace, we have common goals. So what I did was, instead of trying to teach light and love and energy and spirit, because you know how well that would have been received by my brothers, right? They would have wondered what I was smoking and sent me out. So I had to go get the MBA. I now know that was simply a calling, because my highest priority isn't maximizing corporate profits on a quarterly basis. My highest calling was to maximize human potential, to be all we're capable of being. And I had to learn the MBA language so they would be able to hear me in the workplace talk about maximizing human potential in this job with this common goal, personal, interpersonal, organizational effectiveness. When really all I'm trying to do, without ever saying the words, is I want to maximize the light and the love and the energy and spirit within each of us to relate more intimately one another. So
I love that. That is fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, and obviously it's been working because you've, like you said, you've been doing this for 30 plus years.
And you
And
notice it's not totally solved. If any of you know any
no,
other male or female, white or black or Asian or Hispanic, straight or gay, who doesn't fully get it, guess what? It's the human condition. So the marketplace never ends.
that's right. That's right. And do you think, I mean, have you seen inroads though? I mean, it almost feels like today more than ever, there's more, um, separation almost, but yet, I mean, I'm curious what you've seen since you started that program.
Well, both are true.
Yeah.
First, there's huge progress. We are more global. We are more one. There's more travel. The internet helps. Interbreeding helps. This didn't happen in just 30 years. But even since the 60s, there's huge progress. And generationally, there's huge progress. And I have to add that in a recent diversity workshop I was in, I was really deeply touched, pun intended when you hear this, by an African-American male who said to me, it's absolutely true. There's been huge progress. And I just want you all to get what it might feel like to have once had the knife 12 inches deep and now it's only 6 inches deep.
Wow.
Now, even if you start with it was 6 inches deep and now it's 3 inches, or it was 4 inches deep and now it's 2 inches, I think we all need to hear whatever our individual experience is with any bias or any violence or any violation, okay? That no matter how much progress there is, the trauma still exists, not only from the past, but trauma is still perpetrated. So yes, there's huge progress, and that only means great. We're doing the right work. We need to keep doing it more deeply.
Absolutely. Right. I know. And that brings up a great thought I had too about, I mean, really living in the moment versus, being in the past. I feel like so many issues, and again, this is maybe this is all I know, right?
We're all doing our own work.
We're all doing our own work. And so it feels like to me that to really move forward, it's like we need to be in the now moment and going forward, because when we're always dragging our past behind us, I don't know, it's hard to move forward when you're dragging that, that bag of.
Well, totally. In a way, my way of dealing with that reality without it seeming like a conflict is that not only the obvious, we are all learning. We can't live in the past or the future. We have to live in the present. It's all we've got. And without having our history be baggage with shame and or blame for yours, which is such negative depleting energy, that doesn't help us relate either. So in all these 36 years of diversity training, I say no shame, no blame all the time. And I'm not here to point out that either I or you are racist or sexist or classist or looksist or anything. I just want us to own, to notice with no shame, just notice and own whatever our personal history is, and even our ancestral history. What is it? How did we get where we are? And what opportunity do we have to learn from that reality that we're not in denial of, and yet with no shame and no blame, to forgive one another and self, and start to open to hearing these conversations about what it feels like, even now, not just in the past. If I say a certain thing or act a certain way, I need there to be enough mutual safety for you to share with me what I need to learn, that what I just did and said didn't feel good to you. Was that ageist? Was it sexist? Was it inappropriate energy? Was it what was it? Because it depletes the energy. And I need to experience that as an opportunity for my own growth. So I actually love no longer just saying, as we can all do, about all the things we've done so well in our lifetime and that we're on the leading edge. There's lots of truth in that. And the minute I start talking like that, or you about yours, there's less interest because there's a little, even if it's only 10% ego, there's too much human ego in it. I love saying I'm on my growing edge. I still don't know enough of what I need to learn. And I actually love being out in what Rumi calls a field where there's no right or no wrong, where you meet me there, out there where neither you nor I know the answer or the truth. Wow. It's like, I just want to take your hand, or the hand of your soul, and go there with you and go, wow, what can we learn here together? And once we get safe with that, and once we are safe with that, I can learn from your different human experiences so much that I don't have to relearn all of with my own crises, and vice versa. And
Right.
therein lie all the gifts that our diversity brings to one another.
I love that. And I love what you said, the no shame, no blame. I think that is the crucial element to be able to hear one another. And you might not necessarily even understand one another, but you can hear one another. And by releasing that shame and blame, then you can experience
Exactly.
each other from that place. That's beautiful.
Exactly. And if we own, another way that helps that, the minute each of us can own that in the, let's say, the conflict we just might have had in a conversation, that's simple. If instead of me accurately noticing and getting proof from my friends that you're the problem, or vice versa, if I can go, even from righteousness, and I really mean this, even if I'm still stuck on my own righteousness and I can think, you are 99% of the problem, but I must have created 1% of it. If at least I can own 100% responsibility for my 1%, suddenly there's hope that I'm going to improve. You can notice there's hope from your perspective. I might get better, and I just love the opportunity to come from, wow, what's my part? How can I learn more?
That's great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, great. And I know you also had a second experience. So maybe, you can briefly talk about, what happened, but I'd love to know like the kernel of truth of what brought, what was that next encounter?
Well, as I said, the learning never stops, the opportunity for learning. And as I also said, when we do anything successfully, we understandably have some leadership skills and pride in that. And so sometimes we need to learn from the humbling of that. So sometimes the learning from losing something can be as great as the wonderful learning from the life-changing success we've had with ourselves and others, right? So I must have needed more, because after 20 years of this wonderful experience and wonderful success, I then, lots of learnings came. One was a bipolar daughter with her bipolar mother, my wife. And I had never had that experience. I happen to have the chemistry that doesn't know what it feels like to get very imbalanced. That's just luck, no righteousness. And she was graduating from a recovery school we had her in. And on celebration, I said, let's on Father's Day in June 15th, 97, 20 years after the first accident and 21 years ago now, I said, let's celebrate your amazing graduation. I've taught you skiing and hiking and everything. How about whitewater? And they went, of course, Dad. So my 15-year-old girl and her 10-year-old brother in Glacier Park, Montana, headed down the river on Father's Day and were hit by a 100-foot tall cottonwood tree that landed off the edge of the river on my head in the raft and my son's head, and it missed my daughter. So in a way, her trauma was greatest, because my son and I can't remember any of the amazing trauma we experienced. It's just a story. And it was a story that was one of those awful ones we hear every day on the news, that even though it happened in Glacier Park, Montana, it was on the news the next day in San Francisco, where I live. And what it was that my son was in a coma for 2 days. They thought he was dead. They thought we both were dead in the raft. And when they picked up my son and got the water out of his lungs and had him vomited out, they realized he had life. And so the good news is he came out of a coma in 2 days out of intensive care and had to go through mild recovery all the way through high school. But now he's an engineer with an engineering degree and he's fine, okay? Mine was more severe. I had more learning. The left temporal lobe was so destroyed by the fractured skull and the blood and the pus and the impact that when they discovered I was alive, they had to tie me up because I was just talked gobbledygook. I didn't, it made no sense. And they took me to ICU, and I recovered from a coma 8 days later, even after my entire family had been flown there to take the dead body back the next day, because they were told there was likely to be no hope. And when I came out of the coma, I started to have what I now speak from my memory, none of the prior having been in my memory. And so my first memory was, I have no idea who I am or who you are in the room, my wife, my mother, my father, my siblings, and why am I here? And it was an amazing experience because it's as if all consciousness was just cut off. And to keep it short, this 3 years of hospitalized brain injury recovery, every day for 1.5 years, and then 3 times a week and 2 times a week until they thought I was okay. And they thought I would plateau at 30 to 50%. I'm actually glad they make negative expectations, because at least then when they let me go and they said I was about 70%, that was like a miracle. Well, now at worst moments, I'm 95% with little lapses, and at best moments, I'm 110% with learnings from the experience that are just beyond belief. Okay. And yet the process was purely a blessing, not only in the learning, but with the luck that I'm this far back, because not everybody does get this far back. So the first thing I discovered was enormous gratitude. That may sound strange, because the very first thing I realized when I couldn't read, write, walk, or talk and didn't know who I was that I'm alive. I'm serious. This wasn't power of positive thinking or discipline. I thought, I don't know anything else, but I'm alive. Tell me what happened. And I'll never forget, to use a metaphor that helps oversimplify that even better. It's as if in the first time I was in the light and the source of everything, and we're all one. Now it's as if I am trapped in the center of a tornado or a hurricane. And we've all learned that at that spot in the very core center, there is no motion. It's totally still. So if you can imagine that, being trapped in the center of a tornado, in the total center, and everything spinning around you, starts with your body, any identity, walking, talking, being male, female, eating, drinking, making love, running, playing tennis, talking to somebody else, driving a car. Are you kidding me? And what I got in the center without the capacity to do anything else was what philosophers, after thousands of years of study, say is no more than I am. And then some of them go, no, get rid of the I. That's ego. Just am. I got it. I got it, and I do my best to never leave that spot without keeping it noticed as an integrated part of whatever luck I have to have any of the multitasking outside of the center be renovated, be repaired. And so seriously, I can remember when I could learn the difference between a giraffe and a truck again. And then when I couldn't yet drive and have it be safe to you and your child or me, you know, and that took a year to regain the ability to drive safely, you know, and on and on and on. And so,
Wow.
and when everyone thought I was fine, I used to be a tennis player. I said, I have to get back on the tennis court. And I discovered that trying to play tennis was the best therapy I've ever had. It could be any sport, it could be anything. But to hit that ball coming at 90 miles an hour toward me and hit it back at you in the line on a shot, it's like I restarted as a 1.0 and then a 2.0 and then a 3.0, and I'm finally up to 3.54. I was never a 5, I don't mean that, but I'm finally an okay weekender again, and I love it. And half the time it goes right where I asked it to go. And every time it's like, wow, that's multitasking.
Well, like you said, and talk about gratitude, because when you're just in the center of that tornado and literally you can't do, or you're not able to function in any other way, and just to have that gratitude of your life, that's brilliant.
I am.
Yes. I love that. How about I pull a few cards for you?
Go, girl.
All right. Let's see what this amazing universe has.
I'm one of those, I love sharing, as I did with you then. I'm one of those who, instead of going, oh, the only card I'm going to get is the one that was intended and no others were, I actually feel more positive rather than pessimistic about that or judgmental. I go, are you kidding me? Every single one has a different learning. And right now, this is the one.
That's right. Well, and I mean, the cards are absolutely perfect, because I feel like it's kind of the whole experience of what you went through. The first card is surrender, which it sounded like you had no choice but to surrender, right? I mean, in really both those situations that you
That's right. The first one I said, great, this door opened and I'm not in charge.
That's right.
And
the
second one was, I have to surrender everything.
Yeah, you had no choice. You literally didn't have the conscious memory of that. Well, then how perfect. It's all about beginnings, because
every moment is there. Every moment.
Yes, exactly. And I love it, because your outcome is leadership, which is exactly what you ended up doing by starting your company and, becoming that leader that you are, to help share these gifts, like you said, bringing back from the light and sharing. And it's beautiful. And
seeing that we all are one, and actually seeing, it's like the best scene in, I've forgotten the name of the film, Avatar.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was when she goes, I see you. and so I don't mind at all sounding like a child when I go, the moment when I meet anybody, I probably said it to you within an hour when we met, let's go, have you noticed how safe it is that we can see each other at the soul level, past our gender, our personality, whatever, and as I learned in leadership training, and I love the ability to do that totally with the greatest amount of what we call intimacy, or if you don't like that, call it trust or safety, is with no power over or under one another, no righteousness of your income or mine or your age or your melanin or anything, and no sex, no sexual energy, no even feeling, just I see your soul. Can you see mine? When we feel that scene, it's like, oh my God. It's the best.
It is the best. That is awesome. So how can people get a hold of you, or what are you doing these days that,
I'm doing all of the above. I'm still doing diversity training in the workplace. It doesn't matter if it's corporate or government or nonprofit or schools, it's people working together. And so I do training to try to change the consciousness of who's ever in the room. I don't do legal compliance. I don't do fairness and equity. I don't do anti-ism. That all needs to be done. And as everybody listening knows, it's never enough. This is enough when we're able to be authentically our full selves and enable the other to be, and those are mutual gifts to one another. So it's very soft diversity training I do, but to me, it's the core. And since that's about relationship, I also do, once I lost everything and had to get rid of all my employees and the company and the videos and the National Diversity Conference and all that doing, I became a personal coach, an executive coach, a leadership trainer coach, so that now I'll even do personal relationships. And even though they train you, good trainers can train anybody to do anything that they want to do. I don't like using those skills that way. I like using the skills, the doing skills we each have, in this case mine, for the things I have the greatest passion about. It doesn't mean I'm right. It means those are the ones I love and the ones I have experience with. So I do diversity training the way I just said, and personal relationship training. I'm one of those weird people who thinks monogamy is the most amazing gift on earth. And even if only 10% of us feel that way and others prefer the diversity, I go, fine, each to their own, no judgment, but I can really help couples who happen to want monogamous intimacy with the best friend they've ever had, and if they think that's the most wonderful way to live. So I do everything from workplace to personal coaching.
Fantastic.
And I still have the diversity site, which is just griggs.com, Griggs. However, because we all now have LinkedIn, I have LinkedIn under Griggs Productions, or my name, Louis Brown Griggs. But over on Facebook, I did Louis Brown Griggs Personal Coaching. And if anybody wants to hear my TED Talk about what you've already heard, go to YouTube and put in my name, or the Gift of Near Death. And yet, way more interesting than my TED Talk is a documentary I was just part of that's 52 minutes instead of 18. So you got to get your popcorn. And it's called Beyond Our Sight. Okay, really, it's because there's several of us who've had our experiences that we share, and some scientists who believe in it, who talk about how, yes, it is actually all potentially possible, even if we don't yet all have scientific proof about it. So those are all the ways. And my email is just my personal name, Louis, Lewis, at my last name, Griggs.com.
Fabulous. And we'll have all those links on the website too. So people
you asked.
Click over. Absolutely. That's great. Well, Louis, this has been such a delight. It was so amazing to meet you in person. And I just love connecting with you here on Zoom and being able to share your story with a much broader audience. So thank you.
Fun for me too. The greatest gift is to see and be seen, as I already said. And unfortunately, when we're the ones doing the talking, I at least sound all too much like, oh, I'm doing a workshop or a lecture. The best thing is one-on-one,
Yes.
No cameras, no lights, to just be it together. And that's what I love most. So thanks for the chance to at least be here with you and to have others hear us relate to one another. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for listening to today's podcast, Exploring Death. And until next time, aloha. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.